It did not. This is complete false, fake news. I have no idea what he's going to say.
Buy the book.
I did tell him to say that.
Mary Thomas, I said to her before that I had a name for her. Her name is a national treasure. I think there are a few people who just were outstanding in dealing with the whole phenomena of this terrible abuse. And she was one. The other person I would mention is Catherine Corry. Yes. And, one of the mysteries for me about the sexual abuse is that us journalists, for the most part, didn't notice what was going on. For instance, the entire Artane Boys brand parading around Croke Park for semi-finals and finals of getting football and hurling. And we never thought, why are they in an institution? And I wonder what it's like for them in an institution. Wouldn't you think that somebody, even doing a colour piece, would have gone up to Artane and talked to the boys there and eventually got the story? But we didn't. And I can't explain why we didn't, because it was so blindingly obvious. Also, the Magdalene laundries. Well, vans running around the city with Magdalene laundries on the side of them. And wouldn't you think that we might have, we knew that there were women in the Magdalene laundries, but wouldn't you think that we'd have thought, I wonder what the women are doing there? But we didn't. Similarly with the reformatories, again, surely it was an issue of investigation or inquiry by journalists, but we didn't. And also the question of corporal punishment, which is so much a part of the abuse. Of course, the sex abuse is usually, but the corporal punishment was so much part of their experiences. And we didn't ever think, or I didn't, and I don't know of any of my contemporaries that did, that there's something odd about a man striking another man, or a woman striking another woman, or one woman striking a man, is a crime. But striking a child is not a crime. And again, we didn't ask any questions. And one wonders how we had the nerve to call ourselves journalists. And I apologize for asking you to call me that. But the fact of the matter is that we were brainwashed. We believed that the Catholic Church was such a powerful institution in our society for so long, and certainly from independence, but for longer than that. And we were in awe of it, in awe of it, believing that this was ordained by God, that this was the authentic source of power in our societies, that it had the right to determine what happened in our schools, still has, by the way, in the primary schools. It had the right to tell us which universities to go to, or at least which university not to go to. That told us what films we were allowed to see and weren't allowed to see, what books we were allowed to read and not allowed to read, what health schemes that was permissible for us to have, or what was impermissible to have. And we never wondered, we who use the phrase, what's questions to power. I said, what's it?
Truth to power.
Truth to power. We were pathetic. Here was the most powerful institution in Ireland at the time, and we did nothing. Nothing at all. No effort to keep them accountable at all. Now, I want to take you to one little story. I did make one effort to hold them accountable, and this was around 1975, 76. And John Feeney and I, John was killed later, thought that we marked the bishops out of 10 and put them, along with their photographs, on a little miniature profile on the back page of the Sunday Independent. And I thought that since the bishops sought to diminish us, we would have a go at diminishing them. But I was called up to the offices of Bartle Pitcher, who was head of the Independent newspaper at the time, and who was a knight of St. Columbanus. And he wasn't very impressed by this. But he said, to my surprise, that on Sunday last, our daughter, who's a nun, came out to see us, and she would comment on this thing to do with the bishops. And she said she agreed with what was done because they needed to be taken down a peg or two. And unfortunately, I forgot about the pegs. And I made no effort myself to do anything about accountability of the by far the most prominent and powerful institution in our state. You would think that it would be, our office would be the most powerful. No, it wasn't. They were beholden to the church. Happily, other journalists came along in a different generation, and they filled in for us and let us off in many ways. Among them being, of course, Mary Raftery, who did such brilliant work and did it on television, which had far more effect, obviously, than written journalism would have had. But also others, like Alison O'Connor, Justine McCarthy, and many others. But the most persistent person in holding the Catholic Church to account was Patsy McGarry. And he, by the way, he got into the Irish Times as a Religious Affairs Correspondent on a lie. I think the editor of the Irish Times is here at the moment, and something should be done about this, because you present yourself as a practicing Catholic.
I did not. You didn't read the book?
I transpired to a Catholic, a practicing agnostic. Or worse. But Patsy's relentless coverage of the abuse, his analysis of the commissions of inquiry into the abuse, his stories about people who were abused, it has been something that a huge contribution also to our society as well as to journalism. And Mary has already congratulated you on that. But on to your book. The book goes through many of the issues, many of the stories that you published over the years, starting with Paul Cullen, who was the Cardinal Archbishop in, oh, by the way, if I said to Dermot Martin, I meant to say to him that had you been around when we did the marks out of 10 for the bishops, we would be giving you 10. But and moulded Irish Catholicism. And also, I think he obviously very fond of himself. He communicated to the rest of us the need for deference, and deference did terrible damage, as it always does. But Patsy has written about him, and it's not much. Paul Connery is not much written about in the newspapers, but that's an important insight that we've got through Patsy. Patsy goes on and on about Mary Matalise. So much so that I began to wonder. This ought to do with she taking communion up St. Patrick's Cathedral. But wouldn't you think he'd get rid of that in a paragraph or two, or even three? But they're page after page after page. It was all about Mary Matalise. You'll have to explain that. But they also dealt with, they wrote about Mary Collins, about Christine Buckley, whose story was one of the first who married. And that was a huge contribution to our society and opened our eyes so much. He writes about Eamon Casey, but who didn't? But we brought it up to date, and some of us thought, Eamon Casey having a child by a woman was not that surprising. But of course, what his behaviour towards the woman was deplorable. But now the new information concerning him puts it in a very different light. Patsy tells in numerous places about Tony Walsh, who was the paedophile in chief. He did probably more harm, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, he did more harm to children than anybody else. And he was allowed to do it again and again and again. And Desmond Connell was partly responsible for allowing him to do it, changing him to parish where he could find another group of children to abuse. And that was true of so many other bishops that I don't know really what they felt. I suppose they felt that the reputation of the church took precedence over the welfare of children. And I suppose, in a way, that if you believe that the church is the vehicle for us to get to heaven, and without it we'll all go to hell, and maybe that was a factor in their thinking, but that they could have ignored what was being done to the children and become complicit in the further abuse of children is something that is quite astonishing. And Patsy has written about this so eloquently and so forcefully over the years that it's as I said, a huge contribution. Now, there is one other thing, Patsy, and Mary mentioned it. I was hoping that you wouldn't go on much about it, but I'm going to go on about it. This had to do with the popes. By the way, one of the reasons that Patsy was a Religious Affairs Correspondent for so long was because he accompanied the popes all over the world. And in one case, he wrote about some place he was in, I don't remember where. Children were running around barefoot. People, the depth of poverty was enormous. Like, it was obvious that there was they were living in a desert, maybe most of the time. And for what I thought he was talking about Ballagharine. But anyway, back to Vala. He writes By the way, this is on page 214, and it's just a few lines down, you'll see it yourself across the book. And a beautiful young woman drew her scarlet fingernails along my inner thigh, left inner thigh. Now, most journalists who are working that line of business say they make their excuses and left. Patsy makes no reference to making an excuse and left. Perhaps you tell us what happened next.
Read all about it.
We're here tonight to celebrate Patsy as a great journalist and a lovely man. Thank you.